Hello everyone and welcome to this edition of NASCAR Champions, Bill Elliott. William Clyde Elliott Sr., or Bill Elliott, as the majority of the world knows him by, was born on October 8, 1955 in Dawsonville, Georgia. His family loved racing. His father even built a speed shop where Bill's brothers, Ernie and Dan, worked. They even fielded a Cup Series car for 8 races from 1966 through 1974. Always Ford guys. Of course, by the time Bill would make his NASCAR Cup Series debut in 1976, it would be behind the wheel of a number 9 Ford for his father's Elliott Racing team. At Rockingham in the spring, he qualified 34th out of 36 cars and finished 33rd, after falling out of the race only 32 laps in due to an oil pump failure. He would make 4 Cup Series starts altogether in that number 9 during the 76 season. His best start was 26th, and his best finish was 23rd, both at Charlotte in the spring. The final 4 starts of that season for Elliott came behind the wheel of a number 10 for Champion Racing. His best start was 18th, and his best finish was 14th, both coming at Nashville Fairgrounds in the summer. Elliott increased his number of NASCAR Cup Series starts by 2 races for the 1977 season, once again behind the wheel of the family-owned number 9 Ford. Bill's best start was 14th twice, at Michigan in the summer and Atlanta in the fall. His best finish was 10th twice, at Darlington and Charlotte in the fall. Elliott showed some flashes of his potential at times during the 1977 season, also scoring his first career top 10 finishes. Much of the same for Bill in 1978, again making 10 Cup Series starts in that number 9 Ford. He did have a solid run in his first Daytona 500 appearance. It was an improvement, definitely, finishing inside the top 10 50% of the races that he competed in. His best start was 9th at Daytona in the spring, and his best finish was 6th twice at Talladega in the spring and Darlington in the fall. Overall, in 10 starts, he scored 0 poles, 0 wins, 0 top 5s, and 5 top 10s, finishing 33rd in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. For 1979, Bill was able to increase his number of NASCAR Cup Series starts again by making 10 for his father's team and 3 for Roger Hamby. All in all, 79 wasn't that much better than 78 statistically, though he did have his best green to checkered flag race at Darlington in the fall, where he started 6th, led 6 laps on his way to his career best finish of 2nd place. Overall, in 13 starts, he scored 0 poles, 0 wins, 1 top 5, and 5 top 10s, finishing 28th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. This was the beginning of a brand new decade, the 1980s, a decade in which Bill Elliott would solidify his name in both our hearts and the NASCAR record books. 1980, though, looked a lot like his previous few seasons, making select starts for his family-owned and operated race team. He made 11 NASCAR Cup Series starts. His best start was 2nd at Atlanta in the fall, and his best finish was 6th at Charlotte in the fall. Really, the one big thing that differed from Bill's previous seasons was that he got sponsorship from Melling Timing Components. Melling, who would serve as both a sponsor and his car owner during some of Bill's strongest seasons of his NASCAR Cup Series career. Overall, in 11 starts, he scored 0 poles, 0 wins, 0 top 5s, and 4 top 10s, finishing 32nd in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. Elliott continued to increase his number of NASCAR Cup Series starts again in 1981, this season making 13, behind the wheel of a now consistently sponsored part-time number 9 Mel Gear Ford. Ernie Elliott served as his crew chief. His best start was 1st, and his best finish was 4th, both coming at Darlington in the spring. His best start was 1st, and his best finish was 4th, both coming at the spring Darlington race. This was an improvement again for Bill, scoring his first career pole and setting a career high for top 10 finishes with 7. Overall, he scored 1 pole, 0 wins, 1 top 5, and 7 top 10s, finishing 31st in final Cup Series point standings. On December 1st, 1981, Harry Melling bought the Elliott Racing team from George Elliott, Bill's father. The team made 21 Cup Series starts throughout the 1982 season. His best start was 1st at Michigan in the summer, and his best finish was 2nd 3 times, both races at Charlotte and Daytona in the summer. Elliott continued to gain momentum on the frontrunners, finishing second place 3 separate occasions. Overall, in 21 starts, he scored 1 pole, 0 wins, 8 top 5s, and 9 top 10s, finishing 21st in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. After several seasons of making select starts and running partial schedules, finally in 1983, Bill Elliott got the opportunity to drive the number 9 Melling Oil Pumps Ford for Melling Racing full-time. His best start was second 4 times at both Michigan races, Charlotte in the spring and Talladega in the summer. His best finish was first at Riverside in the fall. This was his first career Cup Series victory. This was by far Bill Elliott and the entire race team's breakout season, spending every single week inside the top 5 in Cup Series point standings, as well as Elliott scoring his first career victory. Overall, he scored 0 poles, 1 win, 12 top 5s, and 22 top 10s, finishing third in the final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. Elliott also made his Xfinity Series debut at Charlotte in the spring, driving a number 17 Pontiac for Darrell Waltrip, starting 5th and finishing 3rd. Things continued to grow for Melling Racing in 1984 with the addition of full-time sponsorship from Coors. Bill's best start was first 4 times at both Michigan races, Pocono in the summer and Atlanta in the fall. His best finish was first 3 times at Michigan in the spring, then Martinsville and Rockingham in the fall. Another very consistent, solid season for Elliott, scoring 4 poles, 3 wins, 13 top 5s, and 24 top 10s, finishing third once again in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. He made one more Xfinity Series start at Charlotte again, this time in the fall, behind the wheel of his self-owned number 84 Melling Oil Pumps Pontiac, starting 17th and finishing 9th. The 1985 NASCAR Cup Series season was by far Bill Elliott's most successful season of his entire career, behind the wheel of the Melling Racing's number 9 Coors Ford. Prior to the beginning of the 1985 season, R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company and its core brand, Winston, began the Winston Million promotion. This offered $1 million to any driver who could win 3 out of the 4 Crown Jewel races in the same season: the Daytona 500, NASCAR's most prestigious race; the Winston 500, NASCAR's fastest race; the World 600, NASCAR's longest race; and the Southern 500, NASCAR's oldest race. He began his 1985 season the right way, dominating the Daytona 500, starting first, leading 136 out of 200 laps on his way to victory. Going into the second leg of the promotion, the Winston 500 at Talladega, Elliott was leading the race when he was forced to pit due to a broken oil fitting. From there, Bill pulled off one of the greatest comebacks in motorsports history. He fell 2 laps down due to the broken oil fitting issue, but made up 2 laps under green flag conditions to still come back and score the victory, keeping his hopes of winning the Winston Million alive. The third leg took place at Charlotte in the spring, the World 600. Elliott had a strong car, even leading 84 laps, though mechanical failures left him to finish 18th. Though he only needed to win 3 out of the 4, so he still had the final leg of the promotion. At Darlington, in the Southern 500, Elliott did not have the dominant race car, though he hung around till the end and outlasted some of the other quick teams to score the victory, winning the $1 million from the Winston Million promotion, thus giving him the nicknames $1 Million Bill and Awesome Bill from Dawsonville. His best start was first 12 times at both Daytona, Darlington, Talladega, and Michigan races, then Charlotte and Pocono in the spring, Dover and Atlanta in the fall. His best finish was first 11 times, both races at Atlanta, Darlington, Pocono, and Michigan, then Daytona, Talladega, and Dover in the spring. Overall, he scored 12 poles, 11 wins, 16 top 5s, and 18 top 10s, finishing second in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. After his career best season in '85, 1986 by comparison was not as successful. Of course, he returned to the number 9 Coors Ford from Melling Racing. His best start was first 4 times at both Talladega races, Daytona in the spring and Atlanta in the fall. His best finish was first twice at both Michigan races. Overall, he scored 4 poles, 2 wins, 8 top 5s, and 16 top 10s, finishing 4th in final Cup Series point standings. He did win the 1986 All-Star race when it was held in Atlanta. Until 2020, he would remain the only driver to win the event on a track other than Charlotte, until his son Chase won it in 2020 when it was held at Bristol. Back down in the Xfinity Series, Bill made 2 starts for 2 different teams. He made 1 start in his cell phone number 9 Buick at Road Atlanta in the summer, starting 2nd and finishing 11th. Then at Charlotte in the fall, he made 1 start in a number 88 Crisco Buick for Baker Schiff Racing, starting 22nd and finishing 40th after a mechanical failure ended his race at lap 32. In a time before restrictor plates or anything to try to slow the race cars down, in 1987, Bill Elliott and that Melling Racing number 9 Coors Ford team, they set a new NASCAR speed record during qualifying for the 1987 Daytona 500. He set a record with an average speed of 210.364 miles an hour, only to beat that later in the season at Talladega during qualifying with an average of 212.809 miles per hour. Though Bobby Allison had a bad accident at Talladega, tearing down a large section of the catch fence and injuring some fans as well. Ever since, NASCAR has mandated the use of restrictor plates at both Talladega and Daytona, meaning Elliott's records are likely to never be broken. Elliott's best start was first 8 times at both North Wilkesboro and Talladega races, then Daytona, Charlotte, and Dover in the spring, then Atlanta in the fall. His best finish was first 6 times at Daytona in the spring, Talladega and Michigan in the summer, then Charlotte, Rockingham, and Atlanta in the fall. Another very strong season for Elliott, though Earnhardt's was just a little bit stronger, hence the reason Elliott did not win the championship. Overall, he scored 8 poles, 6 wins, 16 top 5s, and 20 top 10s, finishing 2nd in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. Again, Bill made another 5 Xfinity Series starts for his self-owned race team, in their number 89s and number 9s. His best finish was 3rd at Charlotte in the fall. Overall, in 5 starts, he scored 1 top 5 and 2 top 10s. In 1988, Elliott reprised his role as driver for the Melling Racing number 9 Coors Ford. This was a very strong season for Elliott, winning races, poles, and finally the points championship. His best start was first 6 times at both Rockingham and Michigan races, then Darlington and North Wilkesboro in the fall. His best finish was first 6 times at both Dover races, Bristol in the spring, Daytona and Pocono in the summer, and Darlington in the fall. Overall, he scored 6 poles, 6 wins, 15 top 5s, and 22 top 10s, finishing 1st in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. As for the Xfinity Series, Elliott only made 2 starts in his self-owned number 9 Ford at both Charlotte races. His best finish was 7th at Charlotte in the spring. Things didn't really improve for Elliott in 1989. Really, more or less, his situation remained kind of stagnant. He returned to the number 9 Coors Ford during a practice for the 1989 Daytona 500. Bill broke his wrist in an accident. Juddy Ridley would take over for Elliott after he would start the first few races of the season. More or less, he would work as a fill-in driver. Like, Bill would take the green flag and, the first caution or whatever, he would come in and they'd swap drivers. And Ridley would end up finishing the races for the first few races of the season. His best start was first at Richmond in the fall, and his best finish was first 3 times at Michigan and Pocono in the summer and Phoenix in the fall. For the first time in several seasons, Elliott and that number 9 Melling Racing team looked normal. Overall, he scored 1 pole, 3 wins, 9 top 5s, and 14 top 10s, finishing 6th in final Cup Series point standings. Bill did not make another Xfinity Series start until the 1991 season. Another brand new decade, the 1990s, and in 1990, Elliott remained behind the wheel of the number 9 Coors Ford. His best start was first twice, at Talladega in the spring and Dover in the fall, and his best finish was first at Dover in the fall. The slow recession of Melling Racing team continued in 1990. Overall, he scored 2 poles, 1 win, 12 top 5s, and 15 top 10s, finishing 4th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. The 1991 season saw the Melling Racing team continue to drift further and further away from its amazingly successful run that the team had been on during the previous decade. For the final season, Bill Elliott returned to the number 9 Coors Light Ford. His best start was first twice at Bristol and Atlanta in the fall, and his best finish was first at Daytona in the summer. Things had fallen off so much that Elliott couldn't even manage a top 10 finish in the final Cup Series point standings. Overall, he scored 2 poles, 1 win, 6 top 5s, and 12 top 10s, finishing 11th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. Bill made his return to the Xfinity Series after a couple season hiatus, behind the wheel of his self-owned number 84 Ford. He made 2 starts. His best finish was 9th at Rockingham in the fall. After spending his entire NASCAR Cup Series career to this point behind the wheel of a number 9, starting in 1992, Elliott started driving a number 11 Budweiser Ford for Junior Johnson and Associates. Tim Brewer became his crew chief starting in 1992. Elliott's best start was first twice at Richmond and Charlotte in the spring, and his best finish was first 5 times at both Atlanta races, Rockingham, Richmond, and Darlington in the spring. The series championship came down to really 3 people who had a realistic shot at it going into the final race of the 92 season in Atlanta. Davey Allison, who had the point lead coming into the race, was taken out of the event due to an accident, so it came down to Bill Elliott and Alan Kulwicki. Kulwicki needed to lead more laps than Elliott, even if Elliott won the race, and that's what happened. And you can say that day Elliott won the battle, but Kulwicki won the war. Overall, Elliott scored 2 poles, 5 wins, 14 top 5s, and 17 top 10s, finishing 2nd in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. Now, over in the Xfinity Series, Elliott made 12 starts for his future business partner and team co-owner, Charles Hardy, in his number 11 Ford. His best finish was 4th twice, at Dover in the spring and Michigan in the fall. Overall, in 12 starts, he scored 0 poles, 0 wins, 2 top 5s, and 3 top 10s. As great as the 1992 season was, the 1993 NASCAR Cup Series season was not as great for Bill Elliott. He returned to the number 11 Budweiser Ford. Mike Beam became his new crew chief starting in 1993. His best start was 1st twice, at Talladega in the summer and Phoenix in the fall. His best finish was 2nd at Richmond in the fall. This season was definitely an off season for Elliott. He didn't even make it into the top 10 in Cup Series point standings until race 23 at Richmond. And he didn't even win a race for the first time in over a decade. Overall, he scored 2 poles, 0 wins, 6 top 5s, and 15 top 10s, finishing 8th in final Cup Series point standings. Again, Bill made 11 Xfinity Series starts in a number 11 Ford for Charles Hardy. His best start was 1st twice at Talladega in Michigan in the summer, and his best finish was 1st at Watkins Glen in the spring. This was his first and only career Xfinity Series victory. Overall, he scored 2 poles, 1 win, 4 top 5s, and 5 top 10s, finishing 29th in final Xfinity Series point standings. In 1994, Bill Elliott would return to the number 11 Budweiser Ford for Junior Johnson and Associates for one final season. His best start was 1st at Darlington in the spring, and his best finish was 1st at Darlington in the fall. This would be Junior Johnson and Associates' final NASCAR Cup Series victory, and Elliott's final Cup Series victory for 6 years. This also would be the final time Junior Johnson and Associates would finish inside the top 10 in Cup Series point standings. Overall, Elliott scored 1 pole, 1 win, 6 top 5s, and 12 top 10s, finishing 10th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. Bill Elliott had spent more than the previous decade driving race cars for other owners, but in 1995 he decided to do what several others were doing around this time, becoming an owner-driver, and that's exactly what he did, using the number 94 in honor of his nephew Chase Elliott, who was battling cancer at the time that he formed this race team, before he lost his battle in early 1996. He would form a partnership with Charles Hardy, making Hardy team co-owner for the first season and a half. Elliott was behind the wheel of a number 94 McDonald's Ford. Tony Gibson began the season as Elliott's crew chief until race 21 in Michigan, where Mike Beam replaced him. Elliott's best start was 1st twice, at Pocono in the summer and Phoenix in the fall. His best finish was 4th twice, at Indianapolis in the summer and Atlanta in the fall. For a first-year team, this season wasn't bad at all. Overall, he scored 2 poles, 0 wins, 4 top 5s, and 11 top 10s, finishing 8th in final Cup Series point standings. 1996 began reasonably solid for Elliott and his number 94 Ford team. though he was in a bad accident at Talladega in the spring, in which he broke his hip. He was replaced by Todd Bodine for 4 starts, with the best finish of 10th at Pocono in the spring, and Tommy Kendall filled in at Sonoma, finishing 28th. Bill returned for 5 races, only to set out another 2 races to finish healing all the way up. Dorsey Schrader filled in at Watkins Glen, finishing 13th, and Bobby Hillin Jr. filled in at Bristol, finishing 22nd. Elliott's best start was 3rd at Martinsville in the spring, and his best finish was 8th at Daytona in the spring. Considering his injuries and all, it's understandable that 1996 was a bit of an off-season. Overall, he scored 0 poles, 0 wins, 0 top 5s, and 6 top 10s, finishing 30th in final Cup Series point standings. Bill made his first career Craftsman Truck Series start at Las Vegas in the fall, behind the wheel of a number 4 Team ASE Ford, owned by Jim Smith. He started 13th and finished 2nd. For the 1997 NASCAR Cup Series season, Bill Elliott reprised his role as owner-driver of his number 94 McDonald's Ford. His best start was 1st at Richmond in the fall, and his best finish was 2nd at Michigan in the spring. This season was pretty solid for Elliott, scoring a pole and staying in the top 10 in the NASCAR Cup Series point standings for 20 weeks. Overall, he scored 1 pole, 0 wins, 5 top 5s, and 14 top 10s, finishing 8th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. Elliott made his 2nd and his final career Craftsman Truck Series start at Las Vegas in the fall, behind the wheel of his own number 94 Ford. He started 19th and finished 31st. The 1998 season was not as strong as his 97 season in the Cup Series. He did return to his number 94 McDonald's Ford. Joe Garone served as his crew chief in 1998. Elliott's best start was 4th twice, at Las Vegas in the spring and Phoenix in the fall, and his best finish was 6th twice, at Rockingham and Michigan in the spring. The consistency the team had in 97, they had lost by 98. Overall, he scored 0 poles, 0 wins, 0 top 5s, and 5 top 10s, finishing 18th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. Elliott missed the 26th race of the season at Dover to attend his father's funeral. Matt Kenseth made his NASCAR Cup Series debut, filling in for Elliott, finishing an impressive 6th at Dover. Things continued to slowly get worse for the Bill Elliott Racing Team in 1999. Joe Garone was Elliott's crew chief for the first 6 races of the season, followed by Jerry Pitts for 4 races, then Wayne Orme for 22 races, and even Ernie Elliott served as his crew chief for 1 race. Elliott's best start was 4th at Pocono in the spring, and his best finish was 5th at Loudon in the summer. Overall, he scored 0 poles, 0 wins, 1 top 5, and 2 top 10s, finishing 21st in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. It was the turn of the century, the year 2000, and in the year 2000, Bill Elliott announced pretty early in the season that he was going to be selling his race team and becoming one of the new Dodge drivers, as Dodge was coming back into NASCAR starting in the year 2001. For one last season, he returned to the number 94 McDonald's Ford. Mike Ford served as his crew chief for the 2000 season. His best start was 2nd 3 times, at both Talladega races, then Dover in the spring. His best finish was 3rd twice, at Daytona in the spring and Indianapolis in the summer. This was a little bit of an improvement over the last couple seasons. Overall, he scored 0 poles, 0 wins, 3 top 5s, and 7 top 10s, finishing 21st in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. At last, after 6 long seasons as an owner-driver, Bill Elliott was once again allowed to simply focus on driving, and it showed in his results. He became the driver of Dodge's flagship team, Evernham Motorsports number 9 Dodge Dealers Dodge. His best start was 1st twice, at Daytona in the spring and Homestead in the fall, and his best finish was 1st at Homestead in the fall. This was Elliott's first victory since 1994. Overall, he scored 2 poles, 1 win, 5 top 5s, and 9 top 10s, finishing 15th in final Cup Series point standings. Bill Elliott really had a strong 2002. He returned to the number 9 Dodge Dealers Dodge. His best start was 1st 4 times, at Atlanta and Texas in the spring, then Loudon and Pocono in the summer. His best finish was 1st twice, at Pocono and Indianapolis in the summer. This was the first time since 1992 that he had won more than one race in a season. Overall, he scored 4 poles, 2 wins, 6 top 5s, and 13 top 10s, finishing 13th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. Now, the 2003 NASCAR Cup Series season didn't start strong at all for Elliott and the number 9 Dodge team. His best start was second, twice, at Atlanta and California in the spring, and his best finish was first at Rockingham in the fall. This would end up being Elliott's 44th and final NASCAR Cup Series victory. Overall, he scored 0 poles, 1 win, 9 top 5s, and 12 top 10s, finishing 9th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. This would also be the final time that Elliott would finish inside the top 10 in Cup Series point standings. At the conclusion of the 2003 Cup Series season, Bill Elliott retired from full-time competition. That meant in 2004, he was to make 5 starts in Evernham Motorsports R&D car in the number 91. He did make 3 starts in the 91, though due to sponsorship conflict, Elliott brought back the Bill Elliott Racing moniker, fielding a number 98 Dodge for a few starts. His best start was second at Texas in the spring, and his best finish was 9th at Indianapolis in the summer. Bill also made his return to the Xfinity Series at Memphis in the fall, behind the wheel of a number 6 Lucas Oil Elvis He Dared to Rock Dodge, owned by Tommy Baldwin Jr. He started second and finished 20th. For the 2005 NASCAR Cup Series season, Elliott returned to the Evernham Motorsports number 91 Dodge, making 9 starts. Chris Andrews served as his crew chief in 2005. His best start was 9th at Texas in the fall, and his best finish was 11th at Michigan in the fall. Bill also made 6 Xfinity Series starts for 2 different teams, 3 for Rusty Wallace Racing's number 64 Miller High Life Light Dodge. His best start was 3rd, and his best finish was 6th, both coming at Pikes Peak in the summer. Then he made 3 starts in Ray Evernham's number 6 Dodge. His best start was 6th, and his best finish was 16th, both coming at Memphis in the fall. Now, starting to move away from Evernham Motorsports, Elliott made 10 NASCAR Cup Series starts in 2006. He made starts for 4 different teams throughout the season. At the Daytona 500, he was behind the wheel of MB2 Motorsports number 36 Chevrolet, starting 33rd and finishing 19th. He made 5 starts in Michael Waltrip's 00 Chevrolet. His best start was 23rd at California in the fall, and his best finish was 22nd at Indianapolis in the summer. Then he made 3 starts in R&J Racing's number 37 Dodge. His best start was 36th in Atlanta in the fall, and his best finish was 16th at Kansas in the fall. Then he made 1 start for Evernham Motorsports in their number 19 Dodge Dealers Dodge at Watkins Glen in the summer, starting 31st and finishing 27th. The Wood Brothers Racing number 21 Ford and Bill Elliott teamed up for a 20-race schedule in 2007 in the NASCAR Cup Series. His best start was 7th at Sonoma in the summer, and his best finish was 11th in Michigan in the spring. Once again in 2008, Elliott would return to the Wood Brothers Racing number 21 Ford for another 20 NASCAR Cup Series starts. His best start was 5th at Bristol in the fall, and his best finish was 12th at Homestead in the fall. For the 3rd season in a row, Elliott would return to the number 21 Ford for Wood Brothers Racing. In 2009, this time making 12 starts. His best start was 4th at Indianapolis in the summer, and his best finish was 15th at Charlotte in the spring. Honestly, Elliott had a pretty decent season, qualifying inside the top 10 5 times and finishing 19th or better 5 times as well. Yet another brand new decade, the 2010s. But in 2010, Elliott remained behind the wheel of the Wood Brother Racing's number 21 Ford, making 12 NASCAR Cup Series starts. He also made 1 start in a number 26 Ford for Bill Jenkins at Talladega in the fall, starting 43rd and finishing 40th after a crash ended his day at lap 140. In the number 21, his best start was 4th, and his best finish was 15th, both coming at Homestead in the fall. For 2011, Elliott made 5 NASCAR Cup Series starts for 2 different teams, 4 in James Finch's number 09 Chevrolet. His best start was 29th, and his best finish was 12th, both coming at Daytona in the spring. The other start Elliott made was at Talladega in the spring, behind the wheel of a number 46 Redline Oil Chevrolet for Whitney Motorsports, starting 43rd and finishing 26th. The final 2 NASCAR Cup Series starts for Bill Elliott would come for 2 different teams. The first at Talladega in the spring, behind the wheel of Nemco Motorsports number 97, Evernham Energy, Pellet, and Wood Stoves, Toyota, starting 36th and finishing 37th after an electrical issue ended his race on lap 37. His final Cup Series start came on the high banks of Daytona International Speedway in the summer, behind the wheel of a number 50 Walmart Chevrolet for Steve Turner, starting 6th. Really running inside the top 10 while he was out there, but all the way up until the crash on lap 123 left him finishing a disappointing 37th. In 2018, Bill Elliott returned to the NASCAR Xfinity Series to make a one-off start behind the wheel of GMS Racing's number 23 Chevrolet at Elkhart Lake, starting 23rd and finishing 20th. Bill's son, Chase, who is actually named after Bill, William Clyde Elliott Jr., Chase is simply actually a nickname, though Chase has gone on to become a NASCAR Cup Series champion and a superstar, as well as the sport's most popular driver, an award Bill won an incredible 16 times. So, in 828 NASCAR Cup Series starts, Bill scored 55 poles, 45 wins, 175 top 5s, 320 top 10s, with the best points finish of first in 1988. In 44 Xfinity Series starts, he scored 2 poles, 1 win, 8 top 5s, and 16 top 10s, with the best points finish of 29th in 1993. In 2 Craftsman Truck Series starts, he scored 0 poles, 0 wins, 1 top 5, and 1 top 10. Thanks for watching, everyone, and take care.